Hi, this is Jonathan Rosenhead, Jerusalem psychotherapist. This week's Torah and Psychology post for Parshas Vayigash is going to discuss grief and bereavement, and I'd like to contrast the response of Yaakov in this week's Parsha when he heard that Yosef was still alive, with the response in Parshas Vayigashs when he heard that Yosef was dead. In Parshas Vayigashs, we read that Yaakov could not be comforted, and that he would go to his death mourning for his son. And Rashi explains that Yaakov could not be comforted because the ability to forget the deceased is only if that person is actually dead, whereas Yosef was still alive, and therefore this ability to forget, was not possible for Yaakov, and therefore he could not be comforted. And in this week's Parsha, when he's told that Yosef was still alive, he rejects it. He could not believe it. He could not believe the news. And then we're told that his spirit was revived, and he was able to process and believe this information. So what changed? Rashi says that he saw the chariots, the agalot, that Yosef had sent from Mitzrayim. And this reminded him of the last Torah learning that he had shared with Yosef, when they had learnt about the Egla Arufa. And this memory, this connection with Yosef, revived him and helped him to process the information. So I'd like to look at these two explanations of Rashi. One, this idea of forgetting the deceased, and two, this idea of a memory that connects a person with the deceased, and to see how this relates to two theories of grief and bereavement. Because we have the traditional five stages of grief, of Kubler-Ross, that suggests that a person goes through 5 stages, starting with denial and finishing in the 5th stage with acceptance, that a person is able to reach a stage of closure, of finality, and in a sense, what Rashi is saying, they reach a stage of forgetting the deceased. And this is an appealing model, because it suggests that there's a way of conceptualizing in stages, conceptualizing a complex process. But it's come under criticism, because this idea that a person has to go through all these stages in order to reach a level of comfort and process, in a way of processing the grief, has been rejected. And also this idea that a person can reach a level of disconnecting or forgetting the deceased is seen as an inappropriate way of providing a theoretical explanation of grief. So we have another model, the dual process model of grief, that suggests an integrative approach. The person functions with 2 different processes. The one is the loss orientation. Loss orientation is when a person engages in an emotion-focused way of coping, that they are engaged in the emotional implications and consequences of the loss and how that affects their life. And there's also the restoration orientation, where the person continues with their life. They make the necessary changes and adjustments as a result of the loss in order to facilitate continuing with their life. And in a sense, this dual process model suggests that the person continues with their life, but they continue to have a connection with the deceased. So how does this relate to Yaakov's response, the grief that he shows, and the process that he's gone through, when he hears that Yosef was still alive? Initially, he rejects the news, because perhaps he's reached the 5th stage of acceptance, that Yosef was no longer alive. He was, to a certain extent, forgetting him. There was a sense of closure. However, then he sees the chariots, and this sparks a memory of a connection with Yosef, that suggests that even though Yaakov had continued with his life, there was still a connection with him. This memory sparked something within him, and therefore he was able to then process the information and actually believe that Yosef was indeed still alive. Have a great Shabbos, and keep well.